How's it going, Giants fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. And today we're taking a look at upper management for this New York Football Giants team and how they've kind of changed things. Ever since Dave Gettleman retired, Joe Judge was relieved of his duties. And now you have Joe Schoen and you have Brian Dable coming in here, and the whole kind of upper management string of guys has shifted. And specifically, a lot of people have pointed to Chris Mara, John Mara's brother, as being one of the more negative factors in that front office. He had a lot of say in personnel decisions. And while Mara will say that that's not true and that, he was more of just, threw his grades into the mix and was part of the process, it kind of feels obvious that was BS. And I kind of think that Mara had a pretty big role, or Chris Mara had a pretty big role in the front office. And now that now he's kind of been demoted in a sense. He's also a partial owner of the team, so he's kind of just taking a step back, maybe letting them the actual football guys do their stuff instead of it being more of a nepotism based kind of structure. Anthony, before we dive into this interesting change in front office personnel, how's it going today, my friend?
Doing great. And, this is something that I'm pretty excited about because I've been really big on criticizing the Giants for their nepotism for a very long time. For over a year, probably, I've been talking about this, how I feel like it's ran like a family business and it shouldn't be. And I understand that it is a family business. It was passed down generation to generation to generation, and it will be passed down continually in the future. But that doesn't mean that you need to, hire your friends, hire your family members in order to run this football team. At the end of the day, it is a football team. There are people in the world who are extremely smart football minds and know what they're doing. You don't need to just hire the guys that you like the best because you're friends with them. Dave Gettleman was always friends with John Mara and the people in the front office, so he got that job. Chris Mara worked in the front office for a very long time, and now he's taking a lesser role, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's really good for the Giants to be switching things up and having new people that don't have the tunnel vision of the last regimes. It's good to have new people with new visions come in and rebuild this team. And I think that's exactly what's happening now with Joe Schoen. This is Joe Schoen's team, absolutely. Demoting the president of the team's brother, that's a big sign into saying, like, hey, this is the general manager's team now. He is running the show. And that is super exciting for me because I think that Joe Schoen has done a phenomenal job in this offseason, his first offseason as a New York Giants GM. And I think giving him as much control as possible is a formula for success.
Yeah, me too. I think, they kind of needed to give them the autonomy to make these decisions, whether it be free agent. Obviously they've really failed miserably to build this offensive line. You heard Golden Tate say it a couple days ago that, he feels bad for Daniel Jones. Like, the guy's just been put through the ringer, multiple head coaches, multiple offensive coordinators, stalling progress, and really bad systems on offense, really. So, Chris Mara didn't really have to do with that, but he was a big part of the hiring process for all of these guys, including Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. So I think that there is something to speak about that. But, in the past, it's become kind of obvious that, Maras are very much have a big impact. Obviously, they own the team, but like more so than the Tisch family, they are very much ingrained in the entire operations of the team, from the personnel decisions to the operations and everything. Chris Mara, kind of took a step back, and so it seems. He was previously listed as the senior vice president of player personnel, and he's been kind of shifted down the ladder in that regard to senior personnel consultant. So it kind of seems like he's got to just be an owner, be a partial owner, and just enjoy the team, and hopefully they succeed, and just be more of a consultant, throw his ideas into the mix. But ultimately, he doesn't have the final say. And, hopefully that, Dable and Schoen don't feel obligated to listen to him necessarily, because I do think that a lot of the decisions they made this offseason have been quite different than the ones they've made in the past. We haven't overspent. We didn't push a lot of money down the road. We're trying to get back into a healthy cap situation, dealing with injuries differently. Even the players that we drafted seemingly a lot more scheme fit related rather than just best player available. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's a kind of a big point coming from like the draft perspectives, that they went very much with a scheme oriented approach. Whereas in the past, they would just go best player available really at any single point. And I think that kind of hurt them to a degree.
I think, maybe they didn't always just go best player available because the Giants have taken some players on the board in recent drafts that definitely were not the best players available. I think it was more Dave Gettleman had this thing where he would like to draft his guys, and whether they were scheme fits, whether they were the best player available, I don't really think it was either of those things. It was just guys that he liked a lot and he didn't want anyone else to have. It was almost like a pride thing with Dave Gettleman is how it felt to me. Like, Daniel Jones was his guy, so he took him with the 6th overall pick, even though many people had him as a late first-round pick. Dexter Lawrence was his guy, even though many people had him as a much later first round pick and they took him at 17. DeAndre Baker was apparently one of his guys, so he traded up, and of course we know the colossal disaster that ended up being. And also, he was going to be a second round pick. The Giants traded up to make sure that nobody on day two took him. There was just a pattern there where Dave Gettleman was dead set on getting his guys, and whether that was specific offensive linemen in the middle rounds or no offensive linemen throughout the entirety of the 2020 NFL draft, the things, or 21 NFL draft, things would happen with Dave Gettleman where the draft picks just did not make the most sense for the New York Giants, and they were not of the best value. And that happened a lot. But what I saw a lot in this draft was there was maybe some reaches in value. You could say Wan'Dale Robinson, maybe a reach in value, probably not a second round pick, but a scheme fit. It's what Brian Dable wanted in his offense. And even Joshua Zito, some people had him going a little bit later in the draft. They reached on him because he was a position of need and he was a scheme fit. So I do think you're right about that. They're picking players that fit into the scheme, which I think is key for a first year offense or a first year defense, even just a first year coaching staff. Just to have guys that can fit into your scheme in the first year, that's what's super important because you're trying to build something specific and you're coming in, you're taking this roster on, and this roster has a bunch of players that you don't know whether or not they fit your scheme. But you can draft certain guys who can probably fit your scheme. And I think that's the key part of what the Giants did this offseason was they set up their coaching staff, this rookie coaching staff, basically, to have a good year one, or at least a year one with talented players at positions that they need the talent at. And I think that's super important. I've been super happy with everything that Joe Schoen has done this offseason, the way that he's constructed this team. And it does feel a lot different than what the Giants have done over the past 3 years, maybe even longer, maybe past 3-4 years. I think, the way that they were able to throw out that smoke screen about Kayvon Thibodeau, that's the number one thing that I want to hit on here, because Jerry Reese had a really bad leak issues, right? The draft board leaked, and I think, what was that, the 2015 NFL draft, or maybe 16? I think it was 2016 with Eli Apple. The draft board leaked ahead of time. People knew who the Giants were going to pick. Somebody traded up, the Titans traded up, I think it was, or the Bears traded up, took the player that the Giants wanted. That stuff would happen. Dave Gettleman he did not have a good poker face at all. Everybody knew for months that he was taking Saquon Barkley. They knew for months that he was taking Daniel Jones. But this year, we all thought for sure that the Giants were not taking Kayvon Thibodeau because that's what they had us believe through the smoke screens that they put out through the media. Character questions and all this BS. Really, the Giants were locked in on Kayvon Thibodeau, and they wanted everyone else to think they had no chance of even drafting Kayvon Thibodeau. And I think that is a huge difference, and that does come from the player personnel role, and that does come from the front office. So clearly there was a change made even before this was officially, done on the website, the Giants.com website, showing that Chris Mara was demoted. There was clearly a power change in the Giants front office this offseason because there was no leaks. The smoke screens were phenomenal, and the Giants had a very successful NFL draft under Joe Schoen. And it's one that builds a foundation you're super excited for. So, again, I think there's been a lot of crucial changes made to the front office this offseason, and it should set the Giants up for a much more successful future than they've had over the past 10 or so years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, like the leaks were a big one. That's a great point to throw into the mix because how many times did we see the Giants, just put something out? Like we heard Daniel Jones was going to be a pick weeks before. Josina Anderson was saying that they love Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley, we knew since the combine. You know what I mean? Like this time around, we didn't know if it was going to be Sauce, Kayvon. We heard the Giants didn't like Kayvon. Like it was just all over the place. We heard they love Charles Cross. And I think that they purposefully threw some stuff into the mix there to see where it came from. I think that Joe Schoen, they were trying to, because right after they fired Chris Pettit, right after the draft. So you kind of get the sense, like, I understand like maybe keeping him around because he has understanding of the players. He's already been doing all the work and whatnot, but it seems to me like they kind of threw some narratives into the mix there to see where they were coming from and who was leaking it. And maybe they found out, maybe they found out where all the truth was coming from at the end of the day. And I think the Giants did a really good job of keeping their ideas and their desires under wraps. In addition to that, I think they did reach on a couple of players, which is why they didn't have any trouble getting them. They were able to trade back multiple times and acquire more draft picks without any fear of getting leapfrog, because like Wan'Dale was not projected to go in the second round. You could even make the argument that Bellinger wasn't projected to go in the fourth round. There were guys that were just like a little bit higher than you would anticipate. A Cordell Flott, even maybe not in the third. I wonder if the Giants, just felt comfortable that their guys were going to be there because they were scheme fits. They weren't best player available guys. So interesting, really interesting to see what the team is doing here to change up the management, how it's impacting their strategies in the draft and free agency, and clearing cap space. All these different things. There's so many variables that play a part in a role in the team's growth and development. So hopefully it continues to be a positive impact and positive effect, giving Joe Shea and Brian Dibble in this front office more, just flexibility and giving them the power to make these decisions. So that's all we can hope for moving forward. And, just the continued progress of this team and the players taking big steps forward, especially the rookies making an impact in year one. But if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe as always, my friends. Appreciate all the love. Have a fantastic weekend. 4th of July coming up. Do something fun with your families. Should be a good time. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.